in New Zealand, Maori would, when introducing themselves, do what's called a mihi, which is basically they reference the body of water that is most special to them and the mountain that's most special to them. And I think in maritime it would be useful if we started introducing ourselves, particularly on that body of water piece. So my body of water is the Firth of Forth and the Hutt River in New Zealand. So you can place me somewhere with that. I'll start with an apology. As you know, it is the pre-election period, so I'm not allowed to say anything too policy related, particularly as it sort of edges into the future. But luckily, Mark covered most of that anyway, so that works out well. I head up a fairly new team at the MCA, and our responsibility really is thinking about maritime futures, so thinking about decarbonisation, digitalisation, the ship-to-shore interface, nuclear, green corridors, anything really that is sort of looking forward and how regulation might need to change to support that. And as part of that work, we engage with industry, we work across government. My team is mainly made up of technical experts, so they're the intelligent ones, and I do sort of more of the coordination piece, I suppose. And academia as well. Engaging with academia is very important. We're doing a piece of work at the moment around creating our own areas of research interest document for the MCA, which will be complementary to the Department for Transport's areas of research interest document. And this will be really important for our engagement with universities and improve the way that we work with them, so we know what we're asking for. And how best to ask for it. But I'm just going to touch on a few things just to give a bit of an overview of the current regulatory framework. Apologies if some of you have seen these slides. We have been sort of trying to get out and about a bit more. Just to touch on the MCA's responsibilities, in case you're not aware. So obviously we have coastal state obligations which connect to search and rescue, and also the way that we engage in supporting sort of counter pollution, port disaster plans as well as an important part of that work, and that's something which we need to consider as with the move to alternative fuels as well, how we address those public safety aspects. Flag state obligations obviously is connected to regulation of shipping, but also we're responsible for the curriculum for seafarers. And again, something really important around the decarbonisation space is understanding that human element as we transition. And then port state obligations as well, so the inspection of international shipping calling at UK shores. This just gives us sort of an example, particularly in the port environment when we're talking about responsibilities, and Mark's slide shows the sheer number of regulations in this space, but this gives you a sense of a ship bunkering at port, who is responsible and where, and you can see the MCA's responsibilities is really linked, leads up to the shoreline, as it were. But we work very closely with HSC. We engage with statutory harbour authorities and have some responsibilities in the COMA space as well. I assume everyone in this room will know this is one. Obviously, the challenges around choosing a new fuel is incredibly significant, and many of you will be aware of the challenges, particularly related to the infrastructure piece as well. So we can't talk about the decarbonisation of shipping without understanding what is on the shoreline and able to power that ship. And this gives a sense of, obviously, we, through our modelling, are talking about a patchwork of fuels, and meetings that I've had with Shell and BP, they particularly are interesting because they have the most to lose. are also talking about a patchwork. There's a likelihood that there's no one fuel, as you will know, but a number of different ones. Obviously, there's shore power, there's hydrogen, which can be gathered through a number of ways, and its derivatives. Methanol also gathered a number of ways, but a few different challenges there. And biofuels as well. And so you can really see here, this is a little family tree really, how they're all interconnected, and a real challenge, particularly for larger ports when they consider that there may be a need to provide bunkering facilities with a number of different fuels. But Mark's presentation highlighted that well. The modelling that we've done with DFT suggests the likely fuel types that would be used by different ships, so ferries, workboats. In most cases that are running shorter routes would suit electrification, where there's offshore charging facilities as well that may be useful for crew transfer vessels, particularly dealing with wind farms. Longer range, smaller medium vessels likely to be compressed or liquid hydrogen, but as was highlighted in the previous presentation, methanol is certainly a strong contender as well. And then for larger vessels, there is a growing consensus around ammonia. We're also looking very closely at nuclear and the small modular reactors that are under development, particularly molten salt reactors as possible for larger ocean-going vessels. So recent regulatory change, often people say, oh, government are doing nothing. Well, we're doing something. And there is quite a lot of, as Mark's slide showed, a large number of existing regulations, although not always easy to negotiate. But here are some of the key recent things which are really important for decarbonisation. And I'll particularly highlight the Marine Guidance Notice 664, if you're not aware of that. That is essentially the MCA's response to requests for a regulatory sandbox that does provide opportunities for those developing new technology or vessels with alternative fuels to have some ability, some workarounds. And that's also built into the Workboat Code 3rd edition as well. And the interim guidelines developed by the IMO there, which is not in bold, is really important and a real step change as well. And then future regulatory change. So really what's most important for us here is the interim guidelines for ammonia as fuel and hydrogen, which is expected towards the end of this year. And of course, there will be a gradual movement into making those mandatory. And that will mean something like the MGN 664 will no longer be required. Through MGN 664, we have had about 20 vessels initiate the process. It does include autonomous vessels, so that it tends to be heavy towards autonomy. But there's current active projects in all these areas. So, the UK is doing a lot in terms of development. I mentioned earlier the public safety elements as well. Obviously, that is something which is a concern for us, with greater use of ammonia and hydrogen within what is often an urban environment. So this is a particular area that we are looking at and working across government to build our understanding around disaster planning, or I think the word is incident planning. I shouldn't use the word disaster. That implies something rather negative. But there is a challenge there with sort of multiple responsibilities within the port environment. Although I'll say that we have a very positive MOU with HSC that provides guidelines of where responsibilities begin and end. And just really to end on what can industry do now. I mean, one key thing is to understand the amount of regulation that is out there already. We also do a bit of work with BSI, so there's a number of ISO standards. There's over 800 ISO standards on hydrogen. There's, I think, about 400 on ammonia. There is a lot of guidance out there already, and there is an expectation on industry to have some understanding of that, or at least to know where to look. And to understand, I think the key is to at least have a one-pager on sustainability is essential for any port or shipping company, and you'd be surprised at the number of those organisations that don't have those yet. But most are doing a fantastic job and trying to grasp this very complex process. Obviously, understanding grid connections is absolutely essential. So discussions with the national grid or energy suppliers is essential. It is different for ports. Many ports have not been involved in bunkering before with alternative fuels. There will be a need for more ports in the UK to have some understanding of that or some sort of direct involvement. And we're watching very closely, particularly the north of Scotland, doing some fantastic work around becoming energy hubs and producers of hydrogen, which is really interesting. But there will still be ports that will not be involved in the bunkering process, and that's fine too. And obviously there are other efficiency measures which have been touched on as well, and so we do a lot of work connecting with some work at the IMO around measures connected to biofouling, various other sort of hull design, a number of other areas which is about reducing emissions in other ways, and that has to be part of the conversation throughout. And that's me. My email's up there, and also we'll have questions in a bit. But really happy to engage with you and hear what you're doing, and point you in the direction around existing regulation, which can be complex. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith.